Okay. Today, in the spirit of the new year, I wanted to talk about resolutions. And of course, I don't really mean New Year resolutions, which I think I read that by January 9th, most people have stopped keeping their New Year's resolutions. And I'm really pointing to Dhamma resolutions, I guess. These resolutions I've made in my path and my practice that have really catapulted me along and I think expedited my progress and streamlined my efforts. And just to see if maybe offering them as playthings for you to play with in your mind and in your practice, if you feel like picking them up or leaving them, totally up to you, just wanting to share. So I think the first one is shortly after I met the Ayas, I was listening to them give this talk, listening to Ayas Tusuga, talking about how we can each set Nibbana as the North Star of our life. And whenever we come to any kind of fork in our road, in our path of life, we can just choose the path that will lead to Nibbana, whatever we feel intuit that might be. And I remember listening to this talk, and I was like, yeah, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm going to set Nibbana as the North Star of my life. And whenever I make decisions, whether it's about what kind of job I'm looking for in life, what kind of career I want to curate, what kind of people I want to spend time with, what kind of activities I want to spend time engaging with, I want to make those decisions with Nibbana as the decider. And at the time, I was like, even if I can't make it as a layperson in this life, I'm going to get as far as I can in this life. And maybe in the next, I'll make it all the way. And I think anyone who's been listening to my talks will know that I think even lay people can make it in this very life. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to set Nibbana as the North Star of my life. And not just deciding what activities or which people to hang out with, but also when there's an opportunity, for example, to practice Sila. I'm going to choose the path that will allow me to practice as deeply and with the best, most pristine sila as I can muster in that moment. And I especially want to name that because I don't think I was able to just drop all my defilements and have perfect sila right away when I set that intention of having Nibbana as the North Star of my life. I do think once I set that intention as of my North Star, I do think I stopped doing some not so praiseworthy things with my lack of sila. I think, everybody has a past, and I've definitely done things that I would not brag about. But I definitely stopped lying, stopped stealing, started taking not killing more seriously, like even the most annoying of pests. Started taking all of it more seriously. But what was cool was like it's all a training ground, right? Practice is about training. So at first, when I picked up this North Star to my life, I was like, okay, I'm going to use the five precepts to restrain myself from doing foolish things. And then as those five precepts and those restrictions got easier and easier, then when I consulted the North Star of my life and I was like, okay, North Star Nibbana, where are you going to lead me in life? Then it really became about, just to use Sila as an example, like how can I practice this even deeper? How can I get to the point where I'm not just not killing in action, for example, but also not killing in my speech, not condemning people, not just writing them off like screw you, like nothing like that, and also not killing people in my mind, and also not killing pests in my mind. So an example would be like I used to garden a lot. I had this phase when I was growing all these vegetables in my backyard. And I, I really feel like one of the reasons why the Buddha set this rule for monastics not to garden was because it's very tempting to get rid of your garden pests they're very annoying. You spend all this time growing this beautiful patch of kale, and then they're just covered in aphids one day. But I was like, okay, North Star of Nibbana, I'm going to take the path of not even killing them or condemning them in my mind. I'm really going to practice, I want to see if I can even approach them, these annoying aphids, with this heart of harmlessness and maybe even of loving kindness. So I spent a long time gently brushing the aphids off of each kale leaf. And that was really good practice. I feel like the heart became lifted, the mind became clearer, and the application of sila in that way to these annoying garden pests also translated to every being on the planet and also not on the planet. Shout out to the devas. So this North Star of my life not only told me which path to take, but also how to go deeper and deeper into sila, into samadhi, into whatever panya I have. And it's not, I don't think I was able to jump to like having metta toward my garden aphids right away. It was definitely a development. Like first just don't kill. And then as it got easier and easier, like also not killing with speech and not killing with thoughts. I think the idea of having nibbana as a north star can take one very, very far in life. Like if whenever you have uh, any kind of decision to make about how to spend your time, you choose awakening, even if the practitioner doesn't make it in this very lifetime, I think they will get very, very far. And I think one very easy way to see how far a human being can get is to see how far and what amazing results human beings can get in other areas of life when they set something as their North Star. So, for example, there's like free divers. I just read this who spend so much of their time and energy and resources just developing their skills at free diving that they can take one single breath and then dive hundreds of meters underwater for 12 minutes and come back up with like almost no equipment, maybe a pair of those fins that you put on your feet, but that's it. Like if a human being can go that far, if they set free diving as the North Star of their life, like imagine how far we can each go if we set Nibbana as the North Star of our life. Whether we are a monastic or a lay person, like we can get really far. And even if we don't make it in this lifetime, we can shave off many lifetimes of suffering if we practice with that dedication and that sincerity. And then a little while later, I actually saw this in one of my journals recently when I was flipping through looking for some date. I saw like a little while later, maybe a few months or something, I saw this journal entry where I was writing about how much I intended to practice in this life. And in the journal entry, it was like, um, I was reflecting on how when I look back on all the times in my life that were very difficult, even though I went through such painful feelings in the moment, because I wanted to learn from that moment, and because the only way back to peace was to engage with the noble truths, right? To face suffering, to know its cause, and to eventually see its end. Even though those times were very difficult in life, I learned a lot about myself, about life, about Dhamma. And I was really, really reflecting like the harder the situation was, after I got back to a peaceful place in my heart again, the harder it was, the more beautiful the lesson that I learned at the end, and the more resilient I became. So in my journal entry, I was reflecting on this, and I wrote like, no matter how hard the lesson is, like I want to learn it. I am willing to suffer whatever it may come my way. Like even if it is the most painful thing, I'm willing to suffer it if that means I can awaken. and because I will awaken through it. And it was funny, like I was flipping through the journal and when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so intense. Because it's so different from the way I see and engage with suffering now, right? Like back then in that journal entry, I was basically like thumping my chest and letting out this battle cry, like, come at me, suffering, like I can take you. And now I see dukkha as like basically wallpaper. It's just part of all conditioned things are marked with dukkha. And it's just something to see and know it's there and observe. Uh, but no longer do I feel like I have to thump my chest and let out this battle cry. However, I do think that it was because I once thumped my chest and had this warrior mentality with dukkha that evolved into this wallpaper mentality I have now. Because it wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna be this like warrior mentality, and then, oh, that wasn't a good idea. Let me switch to seeing it as wallpaper. I think it was actually the warrior mentality that really made me want to face dukkha head on every time it came my way, and to really engage with it with the noble truths, to see it through. And every time I faced suffering, it became a little less scary. And every time I learned a little more, especially from Ayasin Tusaka, from Ayachitananda, from the Thai forest masters, like I learned so much about how to face it that it became no longer my enemy at all, no longer a need for a battle cry, but my dukkha really became a teacher to me and a friend. The kind of friend who you would introduce you would introduce your boyfriend to, and the friend who would be like, you know what, I don't really think he's it. Which I think I wish everybody a friend like this who will tell you the truth. I think I am that friend for a lot of my girlfriends, and that's why I have not met many of my girlfriends' boyfriends, by the way. Yeah, this mentality of like whatever comes, I am going to face it. I'm going to engage with it. Like bring it on. Nowadays, like the warrior metaphor doesn't really align with me, especially I guess now that I see it more like wallpaper. So if this works better for you, another way to maybe engage with dukkha in a really head-on fashion is I remember in like high school and college when students could have more autonomy over choosing which teachers they would have classes with. Whenever I heard that there was a teacher who was really amazing, will blow your mind, will change the way you see the world, but they grade very hard or they assign a lot of work, I didn't care about the hard grades and the hard work at all. Like I was always like, sign me up, like blow my mind, change my life. And I would like always show up to class like sitting in the front row with my laptop open, like fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to take notes. I was that kind of student. But yeah, we can engage with our suffering in that way, with that zeal and that enthusiasm and that eagerness to awaken. You know, give it a try, see what happens. Maybe you already engage with your suffering in that way. One can learn a lot. You don't ever have to look very far, and their suffering will be, and there is a chance to learn. I think one way to think of that is like a lot of people hesitate to face suffering head on. So, okay, imagine we are walking down the street and we see a muddy gutter right there on the sidewalk. So it's kind of yucky, it doesn't look very fun, maybe a little smelly. And if I asked you, hey, do you want to jump in the gutter? You would probably say, no, why would I want to do that? But if I said, do you want to jump in the gutter? There is a wish fulfilling jewel, like they say in the scriptures sometimes, there's a wish fulfilling jewel in the gutter, in the muddy gutter. And if you grab it, it will fulfill whatever wish you want. Okay, wouldn't that make you want to jump in the gutter, right? And root around a little bit in the mud? Okay, and then what if I said in all the gutters in the city there's a wish fulfilling jewel in every one? And wouldn't you become very happy to see a muddy gutter? And wouldn't you become very excited to jump in and start wading around? So the gutter, the mud, the slime, the stench, that would all be suffering. And the wish fulfilling jewel would be the insight that can come, the wisdom that can arise if we engage with suffering with the Four Noble Truths. And yeah, actually, if we engage with all our suffering in that way, we can learn a lot. We can make a lot of progress toward that North Star of Nibbana. I also want to talk about how it can be really great to be very clear with ourselves exactly what we're practicing for. And by that, I mean, like, are you practicing maybe just to be a little less stressed? Okay, valid, awesome. Wish you best of luck. Are you practicing for arahantship? Okay, awesome. Yes, I like the specificity. Are you, sometimes people practice for Buddhahood or to become a Pacceka Buddha, an independent Buddha, or a Bodhisattva. And I think that degree of specificity is very important because, I used to be a classroom teacher, and in my training as a teacher, it was always suggested at the top of every lesson plan, the top of every lesson when you introduce a unit or a project or just a task, to state the objective. And that way, the students really know what they're shooting for and where to point their efforts and where to streamline their efforts also. So no effort is wasted. And I think in the KBV community, it's pretty established that we're team arahantship here. And I love that. Love that for everybody. But okay, a couple things I wanted to say. I found it so fun and interesting when I was reading the biography of Ajahn Mun that he said he had previously made a vow in his previous lifetimes to practice for Buddhahood versus one of his best buddies. I forget exactly what his name is, but like really one of his best buddies had in previous lifetimes made a vow to practice for Pacceka Buddhahood. So independent Buddha, like someone who becomes fully enlightened without influence from the Buddha's teachings and maybe has one or two disciples, but doesn't set a monastic code. At least that's how I understand it. So what was really fun in the book was Ajahn Mun. I guess actually Ajahn Mahabua had written it. So Ajahn Mahabua was saying that they were guessing or intuiting that these vows had shaped their personalities also. So Ajahn Mun, as an example, taught a lot to monastics, to lay people, and could expound the Dhamma profusely a lot. Versus his best buddy, who had practiced for independent Buddhahood, didn't like to talk very much and was very hesitant to teach, and especially to lay people, was not very interested. And all of his teachings could basically be boiled down to a few sentences like, don't do harm, don't be lazy, or else you'll be reborn as an animal, or even worse, a ghost, something like that. And actually, I'm going to share this because it's an intimate group tonight. So I have seen glimpses of my previous lifetimes also, and I saw in a previous lifetime that I had made a vow to be a future Guanyin Bodhisattva. And when I saw that, then in this lifetime, I was like, oh my gosh, cancel, cancel, cancel. I don't want that vow anymore. And I definitely went into a meditation one day with the intention of canceling this vow, and I feel it was successful. And I remember coming out of that meditation just feeling so much lighter and freer in my heart, just practicing for arahantship instead. and not having to worry about all the many lifetimes I might have to suffer if I were shooting to be Guanyin Bodhisattva instead. So I'm saying this because, like, maybe in one of your previous lifetimes, it's possible that you've made some kind of vow, and maybe it hasn't matured yet to the point where you're going to have to practice for eons and eons and eons to become a future Buddha. So maybe, and this is, offering just ideas, playthings for your mind and your practice. Pick it up if you like, leave it if you like. But maybe one day in meditation, you could set whatever end goal you would like, whether it's arahantship or not. And also very intentionally release yourself from whatever vows you may have made in previous lifetimes, and see if that just brings any lightness and any freedom to your heart. If any weights lift off your shoulders when you come out of that sit. Let's just see what happens. Okay, one more point I want to make. Mm, there was a time in my life when every single day I would wake up and wish for things to happen for me. Like, there was a time in my life when I was working really hard to become a traditionally published author. Like, I wanted to be a famous author so badly. And at the same time, I wanted to become a biological mother so badly. And every day I wished to get pregnant with a healthy baby. And me and my partner would become parents together to a bio baby. So every day I would wish, oh, may I have a baby? Oh, may I have a book deal? May I have a baby? May I have a book deal? And it was very exhausting. It was like happiness was somewhere out there. And if I could get one of these things, then I would just be happy then, which is kind of funny now that I have more friends who are willing to be honest with me about what it's like to have a baby. It's like if you get that, then actually that's when a lot of suffering begins. Okay, but then after visiting the Thai forest monks and having them blow up my life and blow up my practice in the best way possible, I noticed that very naturally, the wish that I said to myself every day instead was, please may I practice. Please may I practice. And there's a couple reasons for this. I think I had always known this and seen this, but it just took on a way new depth after going on pilgrimage. But I always felt like instead of having all these different categories of things to work on in life, like, oh, I have to get my job right, and then my partner right, and then my friends right, my health right. Like, instead of working on all of these things as separate to-do lists, I really felt strongly that if I just set awakening and practice itself as my North Star, as the thing that I cared about the most, then all those other lists would just naturally take care of themselves. So I guess it's like practice, Dhamma practice is that rising tide that lifts all of the proverbial boats. So I definitely have felt that ever since I could remember, ever since I became committed to the practice. But after coming back from Thailand and experiencing that depth of Dhamma, I felt it in my bones. So every day it became, please may I practice, please may I practice. And also, like, then when I said that, I noticed that happiness wasn't some external thing to get anymore. It was really something that was just here and now. And I noticed that instead of saying, like, oh, please may I have a book deal, and then that day, in the however many months or years, in that day, I will be happy. Instead, it became, please may I practice. And then I realized, oh, I can practice. And oh, I am practicing. And I could just be happy then and be happy right now. And I also want to say that practice looked different pretty much every time I said that to myself, like, please may practice. And I would look around and like feel in my body and feel in my heart, like, what does that look like right now? And sometimes it was what you might expect. Sometimes it meant sitting down for meditation or listening to a Dhamma talk or reading a biography of one of the enlightened masters. But sometimes it was like, go for a walk, buy myself some flowers, enjoy a snack, like it also looked like that sometimes, like especially if I had been doing something very intellectually rigorous or emotionally stressful. Practice was also just being kind and tender to myself and sometimes like really treating myself a little bit, just like I think a really wise caregiver or a teacher would treat a student or their loved one after they went through something really difficult. I mean, it was like when I was a teacher, like after finals week, the kids get a day where they watch movies and eat snacks. Like, I think that is the smart thing to do as a teacher. It can't be finals every day. That being said, sometimes it is finals week, and you do have to take the tests. So it just really allowed me to attune to myself and exactly what I needed in that moment to practice. And there's a lot of joy involved and a lot of stillness and tranquility. Hmm. Sometimes it was hard. There's this thing I've been saying to myself recently just to make myself smile is like, oh, awakening isn't hard. You just have to be willing to face your deepest, darkest fears and shames and anxieties. Oh, but it's not hard. But always, like, even no matter how hard it is, and I think I've gone through some pretty hard things in life. I'm sure other people have gone through harder things, but yeah, some pretty hard things. Looking back, I just feel so grateful. So grateful for the support I had. I think it's important to acknowledge that I have a lot of people who support my practice and a lot of time, a lot of privilege, I guess, is what I'm saying. But also really grateful for the belief that I had in what was possible and the resolve that I had to make my dreams come true. And so, yes, whatever resolutions you feel inspired to pick up, I wish you luck and I believe in you and may we practice well.